Hello, and welcome to this edition of Lift Every Voice, a program of the Louisville branch NAACP in which we undertake to keep our community informed of issues that impact our community, things that impact us individually, and for calls to action when we think we need to do some things to bring attention to issues that are of importance to us. We're not only an organization fighting every day for equal rights against discrimination, but we're also an organization who is in the business of educating our community so as to know what is going on, to know where things are and what has been done. It's also for us to know our history, because if we know our history, as the old Jewish adage is, if you know your history, then you won't repeat it. And we're about the business of not repeating it. You know, when I first came to Louisville, there was a group that I learned of that I had no knowledge of, and I thought myself to be well read, well educated in terms of things related to African American history. But I found when I got to Louisville and was working with the Chestnut Street YMCA, met a gentleman who had served in the Marines, and at that point in time didn't know much about it. And over the course of the years of serving with him, learned about a group called the Montford Point Marines. Most folks don't realize that the military in the U.S. was a segregated unit, and for a number of years, and in many branches of service, African Americans were not allowed to serve. In 1941, with the beginning of the Second World War, because of what was taking place, efforts were made to, in fact, desegregate the military. And then in 1942, with pressure from A. Philip Randolph, the president of the United States then, Franklin Roosevelt, issued an executive order banning, not necessarily banning specifically segregated units in the military, but language to the effect that that would in fact take place. And then in 1942, an amazing thing took place, and that was that African Americans were allowed to, in fact, enlisted into the United States Marine. These men were, in fact, trained at a place in North Carolina called Montford Point, and went through in what I would call, in some instances, just absolutely pure hell to endure to serve and protect our country. Today, we're fortunate to have with us one of the Montford Point Marines, and that is Mr. Charles Stallard, who is, in fact, the president of the Louisville chapter of the Montford Point Marines. Mr. Stallard, welcome.
Thank you. I appreciate being on. You asked me to be on to give me this history of the Marine Corps and the history of blacks back there in the I started out with, my name is Charles Stallard, raised in Kentucky, and I joined the Marine Corps in 1965 and went to Parris Island, which was something that the former Marines could not do. Going back in history, in 1775, the Marine Corps was founded in Philadelphia, of all places at a tavern. And from that day on, the Marine Corps was founded, and it was out that no blacks could join the Marine Corps. None. They didn't want any because they didn't think we could fit the bill. We could do the things that the white Marines could do. So like you were saying earlier, there was pressure put on President Roosevelt. More pressure each year kept putting on. So finally, he signed a bill 8802, tell the Marine Corps you have to start enlisting blacks in the Marine Corps. Okay, that was fine, but there was no place to train blacks because Parris Island and San Diego were segregated. So they could not train there. So the Marine Corps found a place outside of Jacksonville, North Carolina, called Montford Point. Swamp infested, fleas. I mean, the worst condition you can find. And that's where they were sending the blacks to be trained because they wanted them to quit. They wanted the Corps wanted to go back and tell the president, you see, we told you they could not fit the bill. They could not do it. But many of them have told me over the hutch, when you first got to Montford Point, there was a sign on top of the hutch that failure is not an option. So that means that you had to go through the situation, and we did not want to come here and mess up everything. So that's where it all 1942. Yes.
So, Mr. Stallard,
In 1942, that's when. Yes.
I think what's most interesting to me is that in 1942, the first, I think it was like 900 recruits who joined the Marines of Montford Point, African Americans who joined, and the way they described that place, where, as you said, where it was mosquito infected and all those things, in the literature that I've read, they said that in 1942 when they arrived, there really wasn't a facility available for training of the black soldiers.
Right. Right. It was 119 that first come there. Howard P. Perry from Charlottesville, North Carolina, was the first black to set foot on what's called Montford Point, the first one. Then it was 119 that followed behind him. And those were like any kind of like, we'll try you out and we'll see what you do. Before that, since they had no place to train them, they had no black people to train the Montford Pointers that got there. So they had Woods and his staff, captains, lieutenant, sergeant majors, sergeants, everybody, all white. They came to Montford Point. And those are the ones, all the blacks who came there. And they trained them like all Marines were trained. Because the condition made it even harder for them to train, but they still got the same kind of training that all Marines got whether it's in Paris Island or San Diego, where they got the same kind of training. And it was just more partially than what the others were trained. It was all whites, and they trained them.
What I guess what I've heard is, in terms of reading and material about, as I say, the all of the initial training was done by white officers. In fact, there were no black officers at all at that point in time. But what I'm also told is that over time, as black officers or black trainers began to take, they lived up to the adage that is often available or prominent among our people. And that is that we're harder on ourselves than we are on other folks.
Yes. But they had to do it on, and it was really want to do. The whites didn't want to train the blacks because they didn't want the blacks in the Marine Corps. But being good Marines, taking orders, went, and that's where it started from right there. As time went on, there were more blacks who qualified to be drilled, and they started weeding them people out that would take the drill instructor classes and be drill instructors. As time went on, that's what happened. And then some of the blacks who were enlisted, they were treated more harshly with the black drill instructors than they were with the white drill instructors. But they were saying they wanted them to be better than what they were trained by the whites. They wanted them to do better, be better. And that's the way it was back then,
Well, that's consistent.
There's a guy named Mr. Johnson. Right. That's consistent with it. It seems like we always want to try to push the issue of people, our race, being better than what it's supposed to be. And a lot of times it turns out to be, you take basketball players, so they wanted them to be better, want them to do better. Marine Corps was the same thing. They wanted us black people to be extremely, really into what we were doing. And so that's where Montford Point came to the form right there. Was these men and from 1940 to 1949, over 20,000 African Americans went through Montford Point. Anybody in the United States black that wanted to be a Marine had to go to Montford. There was no other place to go but Montford Point. And there are some, Mr. Johnson, he was in the Army. he got out of the Army and come over to the Marine Corps. There were several other people that got out of one branch of service and came to the Marine Corps. Just to be a part of history, a part of something that they wanted to be a part of. Now you said all other branches of service had African Americans, but they weren't fighting people. They were cooks and bakers or things like that. But Marine Corps, most times we did not have a lot of that, because a lot of our doctors and nurses, they came from the Navy.
Mm-hmm.
They came from the Navy, and Marine Corps, they trained. At the time, there was what they call a defensive battalion. They do the big guns, and they had the 51st and the 50 gun battalion. So that's what they trained. But when they did go overseas to Iwo Jima and all those over there, were, I know in the movie Clint Eastwood said that in the flags of our father said that there was no blacks on Iwo Jima, but I met several people who were on Iwo Jima. And what happened over there is that they were stretcher bearers. They carried ammunition from the rear to the front. Then one day, a bunch of them got caught behind the enemy lines, and all the Marines were killed. And the Montford Pointers who were there picked up the rifles and they killed a lot of. And then when the general come up, he wanted to know who killed all the Japanese. And there stood Montford Pointers with the rifles in their hand that had killed a lot. After they started integrating blacks into different different companies, different platoons in the Marine Corps, and that went on from there on in. They were integrated into those companies and things.
Okay,
so that's what got them really a headlight as to they could fight.
Okay. So, Mr. Stallard, in terms of let's talk about your service in terms of the Marines. Tell us when you enlisted, what action or service that you saw, and then I'm going to return back, because one of the things that happened today is the number of Montford Point Marines, or Marines who were trained there, is sort of like the Tuskegee Airmen, is that number is dropping every day with these. And before this group is completely gone, we want to give some recognition. So tell us about your service.
Like I said, I went in 1965. The Marine Corps, went to Paris Island, train, went to Camp Lejeune, trained some more. That's in Jacksonville, North Carolina. Went to Camp Pendles, which is in California. Went to a place called 29 Palms. It's in California, the bottom part of California, for 50 caliber machine gun school. Then went from there straight on over. I went to a couple of stops, right straight to Vietnam. Mm-hmm. I was in Vietnam. They sent me to the lines at Vietnam, where they all sent all Marines on the DMZ. I was at Marines who have been there. They'll know where Dong Hai is. They know where Khe Sanh is. They'll know where the Rock Pal. They'll know where these places are up there. They know what Quine Tree is. They'll know these places. They know. I would not know some of these places if I had not been there. 13 months. Yeah. 13 months living in pure hell. 13 months. And every day it was a fit to live and every day. And you had to carry your rifle or pistol with you 24/7. And you ate, slept, and everything you did, you had your rifle with you, because you never know when you're going to need it. And that was it. So when I got ready to leave, I did not feel safe flying out of Vietnam, Da Nang of Vietnam, till I could not see an island. All I could see was water. And because those rockets and things could shoot planes down, anything. And I did not feel safe. And found out the worst time of anybody's life is when they first get there and when they get ready to leave. Those are your scariest moments. When you first get there, you don't know what's going on. When you get ready to leave, you won't. So that's what. So I flew back to the States. And another important thing was, I didn't know that the people here in the United States hated us like they did. Okay. When I flew into El Toro, California, it wasn't as bad. But when I flew into Dallas, Fort Worth, Texas, I mean, people looked at me like I was a scary monster or something. And kids would point their fingers, and they even kind of spit at you. all your baby killers and all that. And we had no idea why the people felt like they did against. And I blame the Marine Corps, I blame the government for not telling us how people were acting toward Vietnam veterans back in Vietnam. And it took me a long time to get over there.
Well, you know, let me say on behalf of myself personally, and for all the membership of the NAAC, particularly the Louisville branch, we appreciate your service, the work that you did, and what you did to fight to defend this country and to save and maintain our freedoms. You know, some of which we still continue to fight for today. But it's individuals like you who have made a difference in terms of what has been accomplished, and we're really, really appreciative of that. You know, as I said earlier, one of the things that I'm reason I wanted to do this program with you is that in talking to some other veterans, and they talked about the number of Montford Point Marines who are who are still living, and that number is dwindling every day. And I think that people have a need to know the sacrifice you all made, the contribution
So,
you made.
okay, when I joined the Louisville chapter of the Montford Marines in 1993 on the chapter, we had about 15 original Montford Pointers in the chapter. Now one, Mr. Thomas Cork, the only original Montford Pointer here in Louisville
Yeah,
that is still alive.
right.
And he's well and he's doing it. We have another Mr. Watson who lives in Cincinnati, and he's a part of our chapter also. But those are only two that's close that I can put my hand on as being original Montford Pointers. But
So,
because he educated me a lot.
one, when I started the program earlier, I talked about that I learned about the Montford Port Marines from an individual who was serving with me on the Chestnut Street YMCA board, and that was Mr. Thomas Cork. And as I said, Mr. Cork would be quietly talking
Right,
about his service and things he did. And then finally, one day, I got him to really open up, and he talked about his experience in terms of being a Montford Point Marine. One of his most telling stories were the conditions under which they had to train, fight, and live in terms of going on. And then
right,
when you talk about the sacrifice that people make, Mr. Cork made a major sacrifice because he talked about fighting in winter cold conditions, and in fact having frostbite on his feet in terms of his shoes, and he lost half of one of his feet as a result of that. It
right. I
takes
was
a
going to ask
special
you.
kind of
Right,
people.
ask you.
It takes some special kind of people to make that kind of sacrifice for this country and for our freedom. And it's something that we do not spend enough time on thinking about or talking about in terms of that. And young people who today, you know, for the most part, have no idea, no comprehension of what the history is and what we've been through. They think the conditions that they now have always been that way, and it was not. It was not.
No, just like Mr. said, over there, the ground was so hard you could not bury your dead Marines. You stacked them up like a wood pile because there's no way to do it. And like I said, his foot froze off.
Mhm.
It was like 40, 50 below zero every day almost over there. And they walked, and the shoestrings on your shoes and the stitch they used in your shoes just bust because they were so cold. They just bust. So a lot of people walking barefooted and never didn't have no shoes or nothing. And you talk about people having a hard time here, and you can imagine what it is like there. No way to get warm, nothing to do. Just it's just bitter cold for a long time. So I take my hot in Vietnam, which was 120, 130 degrees in Vietnam all the time. I'll take that before I take that. But one thing before we get ready to go, I want to show you. In 2012, the Montford Point Marines were awarded the Congressional Gold Medal. People in Washington, Congress, all they agreed that they deserved the Congressional Gold Medal. And in 2012, we went to Washington, D.C. And one thing that happened, the Marine Corps, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Amos, was going to have a meeting with all his staff officers, general officers, and with his accounting. Said you can't have Montford Point and you can't have your accounting office. You can't have it together. So he said we're going to do away with the general meeting and we're going to have Montford Point. And he did. Took a bold step. They paid for every Montford Point Marine to come to Washington, D.C. and lodging and everything was there. Yeah, what they went through. And I was able to go be with those guys. Even though I'm not original Montford Point, I went there to be with those guys. And it was something to see. And imagine that the Marine Corps paid for all of these men. And whatever way they were in a hotel room for a whole week, pay for everything, and it's like that. And Amos, he stepped back there, Rock, and he did a wonderful thing. Okay. And so they did that. Also, we have a monument there at Camp in June. I'll show you the Progressive Gold Medal. This is what I don't know if you can see it or not. But the Progressive Gold Medal. Then we have a monument in Jacksonville, North Carolina.
Can you hold it up a little higher? We can't see.
Okay. I'm looking. Okay, I'm seeing this. Okay, can you see that? Yeah, that's the inside of the monument there at Camp in June, right? And this is a Congressional Gold Medal. I can't see.
Move it over a little bit to you.
I don't think it's.
Bring it closer to you so we can see it.
This way.
Up. Lift it up. We cannot see it. Can you lift it up? Yeah, there we go. Now we can see it.
I got it in the picture here in the picture.
Okay.
That's a Congressional Gold Medal.
Okay.
I happened to be the national treasurer at that time. I was able to hold the real Congressional Gold Medal, which is hanging in the Smithsonian Institute in Washington, D.C. right now.
Okay.
So so things developed doing these guys, what they did, all they accomplished and everything. And it's amazing that they've done what they did, even though it was hard time. And a lot of people don't know what we went through. And of course, the Marine Corps still has this way of doing things. And I just Marine Corps that's blessed. Our thing was, our mission, MPMA mission, was to preserve the true legacy of the Montford Point Marines. That's why I'm telling the story of Montford Point. I go anywhere, anybody would invite me to come and talk to them about Montford Point. I had pictures, I had things. I will go and talk to anybody. It says, preserve the true legacy of the U.S. veteran. Support veteran programs. Support for youth and community activities. That's what I do. Our chapter, we done that. We do parades, we do anything anybody else does, we'll try to do that. And our local projects we do Christmas basket in December. We do Adopt a Highway program. We do veteran ceremonies. We honor the ROTC cadets, participate in Toys for Tots. We have our Copenhagen Scholarship Banquet. We host and give scholarships to two Black Achievers. Out of the Black Achievers, we give them here. We give two scholarships to Black Achievers. So that's our chapter thing that we do each and every year.
Well, thank you for that. Yeah, one of the things that you mentioned was that your willingness to, in fact, visit with other groups and organizations to share the history of the Montford Point Marines. And what I will tell folks is, at the end of the program, I'm going to give you the NAACP contact information. So if you'd like to learn more about Montford and want to get in touch with Mr. Stallard, you can get in contact with us and we will provide that. One of the things that as I look back over the history is that in 1942, when the Montford Point Marines were started, there were no officers of color at all. And I look at today, the Secretary of Defense is now an African American. I don't know how many Black generals there are, but to have gone from zero to the numbers where we are today represents a significant amount of progress, and it's because of individuals like you that has happened.
I tell you this, Lieutenant Branch was the first officer, black officer in the Marine Corps. We had General Peterson, an aviator, 4-star general aviator. We had Bolden, Lieutenant General, space mission, spaceship. He's flown to many missions in space. I was able to and talk to him a lot. Charlie Bond was head of the Space Center in Florida for about 4 years there. President Obama appointed him as chairman of the Space Center down there. So there are many blacks who come out of the Marine Corps, generals, 2, 3, 4-star generals have come out, and also people like Mr. Cork and other people who went to him. And so we all benefited from theirs. And I like to keep on letting people know that there were people before them who did.
Okay. Well, let me tell you, we really appreciate you being with us today, sharing that history with you. Everybody who's accomplishing anything today stand on the shoulders of giants like you, Mr. Cork, and others who have served our country to place us in a position of where we are today. So I'd like to thank Mr. Charles Stallard, who president of the Montford Point Marines Association, Louisville Chapter 22, for being with us today. And as you listen to Mr. Stallard talk, that if you're interested in learning more about the Montford Point Marines and the Louisville chapter, you can contact the Louisville branch NAACP by calling us at 502-776-7608 and leaving us a message, and we'll get you in contact with Mr. Stallard. You can send us an email to louisvillechapter@lounacp.org. Send us an email, and we will forward that on. Or if you're in the city, you can come by our office at 1245 Catalpa Court, and we'd be more than willing to welcome you to that and provide that information. Again, I'd like to thank our very special guest, Mr. Charles Stallard. But more importantly than just thanking him, I'd like to thank all of those individuals who blazed the trail to help make what is possible in our country today possible for individuals, for the freedoms and rights that we now share, and which we continue to fight for every day, which is part of the mission of the NAACP. But for those who went before us, we wouldn't have the opportunities that we have today. And so our lives have to be about making a difference in terms of our community and what we do. We can do impact and have the impact when we go about the business of doing what we need to do. That impact happens when we lift every voice. And when we lift every voice, we make a real difference in terms of our country. Thank you, Mr. Stallard, and thank you for listening to this program today. Thank you.
I am the largest.
The oldest.
I am the baddest.
The boldest.
I am protecting our voting rights.
And our environment.
I am ending racial profiling.
And fighting HIV/AIDS.
I am advancing economic equality.
And equality.
For all.
I am.
I am.
I am.
I am NAACP. Are you?
Take a stand at IamNAACP.org.